we've gone through the list here, and thank you all for your patience. We just want to make sure we kind of got everybody, and in the room here we can see your smiling faces, so thanks. There's attendance sheets there on each one for the row, an attendance sheet, so just go ahead and fill that out, pass it down, and we would appreciate it. We'll go ahead and kind of launch into a webinar as folks still join on the phone. If you are coming on the phone and you're going to be on the web, if you can type in your name, that way we have a record of your attendance, and that'll be very helpful. So let's get started. And again, in the room, thank you for your patience as we go through the roll call. We're looking at why we actually have called this session. Many of you, most of you perhaps, expressed interest in our May Gets Education session with the feedback that you gave. You wanted to participate in a dispute process training session. So this is a culmination, I guess, of that. We wanted to get it out there not only in person, in attendance, but also on the web to give an opportunity for a lot of you to participate. If you need the PowerPoint slides, they're available already out on the GTA website. We have a link here, and you would be able to see that obviously in the room and on the web. You ought to be able to catch that. Also, if you're participating on the phone by web and you want to complete an evaluation form, please send an email to Sean Whitney, and there's her address there on the screen. So let's jump into the specific where we're headed today. Our learning objectives. Definitely we want to understand the accountable parties in the process. We're looking at the timing as well during the process. We want to understand the adjustments, what prior period adjustments, those occur month to month, and we want to know what those are and why they're there. And then certainly become, as usual, familiar with the processes, tools that are used to manage the consumption or manage the look of the dispute process. After this session, you'll be asked to complete a feedback form demonstrating your understanding of the material. That's there in front of you here in the room, so please go ahead and do that. Let me double check, make sure on the phone, are you guys able to see everything on the web that we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I just needed one confirmation. We got a person here that's actually looking as well. So, all right. With that, I think we're going to turn it over to David Cornwall with GTA Finance, and he's going to lead us through the presentation. David.
All right. Thank you. I heard some whistling going on as my name was being as I was being introduced, so thank you for the whistling. I'm not sure if you were whistling because of your affection towards me, or if there was something else there. Anyway, something else. Okay. No, seriously though. I'm David Cornwall. I'm the feel a little loud. David Cornwall. I'm the finance director here at GTA for the Gets services and Gets invoices. This particular presentation was put together with the help of Kevin Schultz. I wanted to acknowledge his help in doing this and going over this particular process. I want to say, before I actually jump into anything, I want to say this. This is a process that's current, okay? Are there opportunities for improvement? Sure there is. There's always opportunities for improvement. But I want you to understand this is how it actually works for the moment. So again, like Lanny was talking about, by the end of this, there would be things that I would want you to walk away with. Our agenda is these types and criteria for submitting disputes. Use timeline and process. The 90-day policy, that's that limitation policy that got introduced back in January. And then we'll talk about prior period adjustments. At the end, if we've got enough time, maybe we could do some question and answers. What I'd like for you to do is I'd like you to hold off on some of those questions. If something comes up, hold off on it. Write it down. Let me get through the presentation, and if you still have a question, then please bring it up. Also keep in mind, this is not the forum to try to address those individual disputes that you might have open right now. If you've got a question about that, please go ahead and send it over to Chargeback Admin or me, and we'll deal with it that way. All right? Okay. So let's start off. Types of billing disputes. There are basically two types. Okay, enterprise billing disputes you've got agency or customer level disputes. Well, let me tell you the difference. The enterprise dispute at the enterprise level, and for resource units, it usually impacts multiple agencies, not just yours. It requires knowledge of the enterprise trends and contract changes. If you don't have that, it's kind of hard to tell whether or not we've got an enterprise-wide dispute. And it's usually initiated by GTA Finance. Different, on the customer level disputes, it usually impacts one customer. Okay? It might impact more than one, but usually just one. And that customer will take the time to go through the invoice because they have specific knowledge about their agency. They have specific knowledge about some operational events that took place. Again, without that information, you probably won't be able to determine or identify a particular dispute. Okay? You, the customer, would initiate that, and it's submitted to the vendor by GTA Finance. Good question. Any questions there? Okay. Every dispute has criteria that we need in order for that dispute to be submitted. So here's the criteria. All disputes, managed network services as well as infrastructure, are sent to chargebackadmin@gta.ga.gov. Okay? All disputes. Sometimes disputes are sent elsewhere. And we've gotten calls before saying, hey, what's going on with this dispute? Well, who would you contact? Who would you send it to? If you sent it to GTA, chargebackadmin@gta.ga.gov, we'll have some record of it. Okay? Disputes cannot be researched without this information. Things like the invoice number of charges being disputed, the month or months being disputed, the cost center that's affected, the resource unit, specific items within the resource unit. If it's a voice port number, if it's a circuit number, please include that information with it. Explanation of the reason for the dispute. It's not enough to say, hey, look, I'm disputing this information, I'm disputing this number. Tell us why. Is it because you disconnected it and it didn't come off the bill? Is it because it doesn't belong to you? Give us some explanation as to why there's a reason for that dispute. Any particular dates, any order numbers, any information that you can to help us and the vendors research the dispute. If any of this information is missing, it's going to delay the resolution of the dispute. It's going to delay the probability of you getting back any adjustments, credit. Okay? So please, enter this information, and we can be a little more timely in resolving the disputes. All right, so here's the big picture. I'm going to talk about the timeline. I'm going to talk about it from you, the customer, from your experience. And all the way through from the time you submit it to the time you actually see something reflected on your bill. Okay? Starting with infrastructure. Business days. The infrastructure bill, or the dispute process, is measured in business days. So let's say on business day 1, the dispute is submitted to chargeback admin. Okay? GTA would validate. Sorry about that. GTA would validate the dispute as it comes in. Okay? So we don't just take it and pass it over to the vendor. We've got to validate it. We've got to make sure there's some of that minimum or that criteria that I mentioned in the prior slide. That criteria has to be there. Okay? But we'll do that. We'll create a tracking ticket number, send an email back to the agency saying, hey, look, we got it. Okay? Actually, that's done automatically. And then ZCA creates a maximal ticket for dispute on the infrastructure side. The vendor acknowledges receipt, okay? And they have, on the infrastructure side, up to 20 business days, contractually, 20 business days to research and resolve that dispute. Resolve, let me just clarify something. Resolve doesn't mean that you're going to see it on your invoice in 20 days. Resolve means that they've researched it and they've made some decision about what you've submitted as a dispute. Does that make sense? Okay? And contractually, that's 20 days. So sometime within that 20 days, they're going to send, or maybe even at the end of 20 days, they're going to send that resolution back over to GTA Finance. GTA Finance doesn't take the resolution and say, okay, it's done, without doing some sort of evaluation. Okay? What we're going to look for, we're going to look for any sort of contractual compliance within that resolution. We're not, however, going to know if there's some specific event that occurred at your agency that would say, hey, look, Mr. Vendor, this is not appropriate, and we don't accept this. We're not going to have that information. We're going to rely, again, on the agencies to provide that information. So GTA receives, reviews, and the resolution gets sent to the agency. The agency receives the resolution. IBM closes the ticket. And prior period adjustments, credits, if you will, they're applicable, would not show up until anywhere from 20 to 50 business days later. Depends on when the dispute came in and when the resolution was provided. It came in sometime before the 15th of the month, and I'll talk about this a little more. If it came in before the 15th of the month, it's possible that you'll see it on the very next invoice. If it came in after the 15th, let's say the 16th, 17th, it could be that you will see it in 2 invoices. Okay? From start to finish, that could take anywhere from 47 to 77 business days. Okay? So please understand, the full timeline from the time you submit to the time you actually see a credit, could it be anywhere from 47 to 77 business days. The timing. Okay. This is on the infrastructure side. On the M&S side, steps are pretty much the same, with one major difference. That major difference being AT&T has contractually up to 90 calendar days, up to 90 calendar days, to research and resolve any disputes that have come in through the door. Okay? You walk through all the steps, those steps again, agency submitting the disputes to chargeback admin, your reviews of the resolution, okay, and prior period adjustments reflected on the bill. That particular time frame could go all the way from 110 to as many as 140 calendar days, up to. Now, yes, it does seem long, and it is long. Right? And we've talked with our vendors about that. But again, remember what I said at the beginning. We're talking about current state. Our vendors actually haven't been taking this long, okay, on the majority of the disputes. So, again, 47 to 77 business days from start to finish on the infrastructure side, 110 to 140 calendar days up to on the M&S side from start to finish. Let me go ahead and dive down into the process, the actual process. So again, customer emails chargeback admin. Mentioned that a little while ago. Customer will receive an automatic email that says, hey, look, we acknowledge receipt of your dispute. GTA Finance, will open up a dispute in what's called our DART tool. That's our dispute analysis and resolution tracking tool. You get a ticket number from that. GTA submits the dispute to the appropriate service provider, and then GTA provides that dark ticket number to the customer within 2 business days of the SLA clock start. Right here, this is when that service provider, remember that previous slide, this is when that clock starts for the service provider to go ahead and start researching and resolving your dispute. Okay? Okay. So let's say the service provider has gone ahead and researched it, resolved the dispute. They will then submit the resolution and any applicable credits to GTA Finance. If GTA agrees, GTA does not always agree, contrary to popular belief. If GTA agrees that the dispute or the ticket's been resolved, GTA will notify the customer and then advise to which billing cycle the adjustments should appear. If GTA agrees. I just want to emphasize that. Not automatic. If GTA disagrees, just in case, if GTA disagrees with the resolution, GTA will notify the service provider and provide reasons for disagreement. Okay? With new supporting documentation. And the reason why it's new is if the service provider had that information, the thought is they might have a different outcome, different resolution. Okay? Maybe it might have been more months on the credit. Maybe instead of them rejecting it, they would have accepted it. So GTA would have to provide new supporting documentation as to why it's rejecting the resolution provided by the service provider. Continuing along this process, if the customer accepts the service provider resolution, GTA closes the dispute ticket in the tracking tool, in our DART tool. If the customer disagrees, and none of you have disagreed with any of the resolutions provided, right? Right. Okay. But if the customer disagrees, the customer notifies GTA and provides a reason for disagreement with new supporting documentation. In other words, you can't just come back and say, I disagree, and I've given you the reason why. Okay? There's got to be something new, some supporting documentation that says, hey, look, this is why I disagree. Maybe you didn't have this before. Maybe you didn't know this thing about this particular event. Here's why. GTA will take that new information and submit that back to the vendor. And if the vendor agrees with the customer, the vendor will submit the updated resolution to GTA. If the vendor disagrees, then then GTA will facilitate a discussion between customer and vendor. Let me pause right here. In the past, what we had been doing was we've been allowing this particular iteration to go back and forth many times. Customer disagrees. Customer says, well, here's my new information. The vendor disagrees with what the customer says with new information. Customer comes back again and says, well, here's some more information. We've allowed that to go back and forth, again, for multiple iterations. We're going to stop that. And it stops right after this second part where if the vendor disagrees with the customer, okay, that we're going to jump right in. This is going to be our appeals process here, where GTA gets in the middle and says, okay, let's get everybody in a room. Let's discuss it. Let's get a conference bridge going. Get all of your documentation together. Let's get this resolved. No more outstanding, lingering disputes. No more back and forth. Is that going to help? We think so. We definitely want to go ahead and make sure that we try this, because there are a couple of disputes that have taken that path. and they've gone on for too long. The majority of them don't take that long, but 1 or 2 do. We want to make sure that we remove that obstacle from the process. All right, billing timelines. So that was the process. Okay. Let's talk about billing timelines. On the infrastructure side, invoice rendered to customers on the 15th day of the 15th business day of the month. Okay. Hopefully you've been getting all of your invoices at that time. I believe you have. The service provider has 20 days within which to resolve a customer-level dispute. We talked about that being the SLA target. The credit or solution may not be reflected until the second invoice cycle after the dispute is logged. Again, going back to the process that I showed you, it all depends on when the dispute came in and how long it took the service provider or the vendor to resolve that dispute. If they resolve it again before the 15th business day of the month, when they take that snapshot, the update would have taken place, and then you should see it on the next invoice. If it's, again, after the 15th of the month, the snapshot's already taken, they won't be able to see that until the next snapshot is taken the following month. Applicable credits will include the disputed months and any additional months required for processing. We had a few people ask, hey, what if it's taking long for my dispute to get resolved? I only disputed the single month, or I disputed 2 months, but it took 2 months or maybe 3 months for me to get my credit back. Well, that time frame, that 2 or 3 months that I waited to get the resolution, would it be included in the credits or the adjustments? The answer is yes. Okay? If for some reason it's not, please, don't let us know. But it absolutely should be included. So whatever months you've disputed, plus whatever time frame you had to wait, should be included in the adjustments when you get it on your invoice. On the M&S side, again, a couple of differences. Invoice rendered to customers on the 10th business day of the month. The service provider has up to 90 days within which to resolve the customer-level disputes. Credit or resolution may not be reflected until the 4th invoice cycle, again, 90 days, right? And applicable credits will include the disputed months and any additional months required for processing. Is this making sense so far? Okay, I got 1 or 2 heads.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your response on the phone. Appreciate that. So if we were to use an example, May 6th, an agency sends a dispute to chargeback admin. May 11th, CCA researches the dispute, opens a ticket with IBM. 2 business days. If for any reason the criteria or the dispute is too vague, IBM can request additional detail from GTA or the agency. Again, that would slow down that whole process. All right, so you want to make sure you provide your all the criteria up front. June 6th, IBM resolved the dispute. Saying that's the 20th business day. To the 19th, G-Smart invoices are released, and June invoice may RU consumptions included in there. Credit will reflect on the July invoice. Why? The invoice cutoff for RUs is the 15th business day of the month. Okay? In this situation, the dispute was resolved before the 15th. So you have to see the credit pretty quickly. Okay? Had that been slightly different, where the resolution, again, was sometime after the 15th, you'd have to wait an additional invoice cycle to see the credit. Okay? Okay, I'll let you go ahead and ask the question real quick, because I did go through a number of slides.
Okay, fine. I just wanted to ask a question. The cutoff date is the 15th, and the date of the construction invoice is the 15th. Are we talking the month before? The cutoff date is the month before?
Yeah, the cutoff date is the month before, right? So, again,
so
in this example, if they resolved it on June 6th, right, the cutoff for that particular month, June 15th, the information that is snapshot on the 15th is what will show up on the July invoice.
July.
Correct.
David, this is Monica from GDI.
Knew that would happen. Just one question and opened up the floodgates.
I just, for disputes that we send, once the resolution has been resolved, we've had issues where it's taking, several months to get the credit or the refund posted on the invoice. Is that going to be looked at to kind of reel in that time? And also, when you get into year end, we're closing out the fiscal year, and if we have to go in and identify those funds to cover those expenses, and those credits come in the next fiscal year, then that messes up our budget. So is that being looked at?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, Monica, it's being looked at. But one of the things that I would say is that if you've got credits going back multiple months, even if it's at the end of the fiscal year, we still have to allow our vendors the opportunity to research those disputes. So sometimes it's going to be difficult to tell you exactly what the amount is, or even estimate it for that matter. But we will take a look at it. We will go ahead and try to estimate it as best we can, but realize it would be an estimate at best. All right. I'm going to continue. All right, no more questions until it's finished. Oh, no. I'll give you an opportunity. All right, similarly with M&S, timeline example, July 12th, the invoice is rendered. July 15th, customer finds the error and submits the dispute. 17th, GT submits the dispute to AT&T. Again, AT&T has up to 90 calendar days to resolve it. On average, by the way, it's only taken them about 30 to 45 days. Certainly over the last 90 days, it's only been taking them about 30 to 45 days to resolve the dispute. October 17th, AT&T submits credit for resolution. Again, that's assuming that they took the full 90 days. And then the credit would appear on the customer's December invoice. Okay? Let me tell you why real quick. In AT&T, their snapshot is usually at the end of the month. Okay? But if they snapshot at the end of October, it's not going to show up on the November invoice. Too soon. They've already snapshot that back at the end of September. So if they snapshot at the end of October, it's not going to show up until the December invoice. Okay? Slightly different. A snapshot makes a big difference. And the ability for each one of our vendors to process the invoices and the correlating adjustments. I just wanted to put some averages in there in terms of how long it's been taking. Granted, this is not for every single dispute. This is just the average. Okay? So average number of disputes for infrastructure is right at around 25 per month. Okay? The average resolution time is right at about 20 business days. 20 business days. Again, the contractual obligation is 20 business days. On the M&S side, they're averaging right at about 30 disputes a month. Okay? And the average resolution time is right at around 45 calendar days. Again, this is based on data over the last 90 days, the last 3 months. Okay? In the past, it might have taken longer. And we're, again, still looking for ways to improve this, but right now this is where they're at. Okay? The contractual obligation for AT&T, again, is 90 calendar. Okay. The next item is the disputes, the 90-day disputes limitation policy. Right? I put the word limitation there. Okay. When can disputes be filed? Once an invoice is issued by GTA, the charges on the invoice can be disputed until 3 invoices have been issued. So, you have a January invoice. Notice something is wrong on your January invoice. You can dispute it in January. You can dispute it in February. You can dispute it in March. However, by the time the April invoice comes out, okay, that 90-day window is now closed for the dispute that was identified on the January invoice. So the question is, why did we do that? Why did we have this? Well, let me tell you what was happening before we did this. We'd get disputes coming in for multiple months. We had some agencies that wouldn't look at their invoice for about 6 months at a time. And they would say, hey, look, I found something on my invoice for 6 months ago. I want credit back for these 6 months. Well, let me tell you what that did. That created an abnormally large workload where not only GTA had to go ahead and try to validate all that information, but the vendor had to validate that. We said, okay, all right, we're going to get some credit back. But then we ended up with a lot of issues trying to cross fiscal years when that occurred, and it did occur from time to time. Okay? Sometimes those credits or those charges belong to other agencies. Well, if the state used the service, the state has to pay for it, right? So agency A says, but it wasn't mine. It was agency B's. Agency A says, I want a credit for 6 months. Agency B says, are you kidding me? 6 months? I don't have that in my budget anymore. That was last year. Ooh. What do we do? We came up with this idea. We said, okay, 3 months. Validate. Review your invoice. Send the disputes in. We took the time to say, hey, look, we've got a group of folks who are part of our IT dispute team. This is what we're thinking. This is what we're going to do. Any objections? No. Why? Because it's going to help you get your credits back sooner. It's going to help adjust your inventory sooner. If something's wrong, you'll get it corrected sooner. Seems like a win-win. We didn't do this one in a box. We're isolated from you. We came out, we said this is what we're going to do. We also even said, hey, look, we're going to let you know what's coming up in the next 3 months. So back in November, we started saying, hey, look, this is coming, this is coming, this is coming. Here we are. January, we went ahead and implemented this 90-day policy, limitation policy on disputes. This chart is actually just another way of looking at what I just talked about. So if your invoice month is July, months that you can dispute your July invoice, July, August, September. Can't dispute it in October. 90-day window is closed. And you go down the line and you notice, hey, look, I just want to point it out to you if you haven't noticed it. As you start to get down through the end of the year, okay, the June invoice, we're saying, hey, look, going back to Monica's question, hey, look, we got closeout coming up. What do we do in that particular case? The June invoice, as quickly as you can. Review it. See an error, dispute it as quickly as you can. Right? Now, this is how it works. Can there be exceptions? Yes, there can be exceptions. Unique cases. Right? It's got to be unique. I can't even think of how unique it's got to be. It's got to be unique. This is the standard. This is how it works. Okay. We talked about some of this already. The get invoice collection dates. Vendor taking snapshots on the M&S side, last day of the month, 2 months prior to billing month. On the infrastructure side, 15 days of the month. Again, I just wanted to reiterate this because this is so important. This has a lot to do with when you'll actually see the adjustments show up on your invoice. Vendor bills, 5th business day of the month on the M&S side, 10th business day on the, 5th business day of the month on the M&S side, 10th business day on the infrastructure side, and GTA bills customers 10th business day for M&S, 15th business day for infrastructure. So AT&T's invoice is due 35 days from the resource unit snapshot date. IBM's collection in the middle of the month allows them 25 days to produce their invoice to GTA. Again, same thing, mentioned it earlier in some of the other slides. Just wanted to reiterate it. If we were to throw some dates in there for this, again, M&S, we'll just use the M&S column. Resource unit inventory date is on the 30th of October of 2012. Vendor would produce their invoice on December 7th, and GTA invoice date would be December 14th, and GTA G-Smart invoice date range would be from December 1st to December 31st. Same thing on the infrastructure side. October 15th would be the inventory date. The invoice would show up on November 15th. GTA invoice date would be November 22nd, and the G-Smart invoice date range would be November 1st through November 30th.
Not a question, it's a suggestion. Could you say more about the bottom line? What does that invoice date range mean?
That's what you would actually see on the invoice, the date range. Yeah. It doesn't have an invoice date, it has a date range. Still December, for the M&S. So you might see, if you were to take one of your utility bills, it might actually say something like, a particular date, statement date, right? We use a date range in our system. That's what it is.
That was more of a statement, too. Apologize for interrupting, but I know that in the past, we've had situations where an agency would get their bill, and there would be something on their bill that they would say, I don't have that anymore. Mm-hmm. Well, it's true. You don't have it at the time the bill was rendered, right. But based on this slide, the bill was rendered in December. You had it back in October, which right. is what you're paying for on the December bill. So that in and of itself drives some disputes just based on folks not understanding that what's on this month's bill was really for consumption that took place 2 months ago.
That's absolutely correct.
If the agencies would be more careful in identifying those dates, it might even eliminate some of the disputes coming in.
That's absolutely correct, Joe. That happens quite often when somebody asks to have, again, some sort of line or service disconnected, and they're saying, hey, look, I asked to have it disconnected in this particular month or this particular date. How come it still showed up on the next invoice? Chances are it will show up on the next invoice if it was sometime after the snapshot was taken. Or it might show up for 2 months. Again, depending on which invoice we're talking about, depending on when that particular activity took place.
So, David, in summary, then, just for financial purposes, that range there represents the accounting period for that. Shows the period from the usage that it's used.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. If you didn't hear Kevin in the back of the room, what Kevin said was that range represents the date range for the accounting period, not necessarily when the activity took place. Thank you both. Okay, prior period adjustments. What we did here was we tried to separate out the prior period adjustments. Any credits, adds that might have come onto your bill, put it into its own area so that you'd be able to see it pretty clearly. It used to be customers would say something like, hey, look, I got a credit, but I don't know I don't know when it's for, I don't have the detail for it, it's buried in there. Okay? Well, here's a summary on the infrastructure side of what you'll see. So this is actually an adjustments page. And just like you can with the regular RUs, what you can do is you can drill down into any one of those units and get the details behind that. I'll show you that in a second. Similarly, on the M&S side, the adjustments page, and we just took one of these. For this particular phone number, we're seeing prior period adjustments, okay, and the actual dollar amount. Okay? The prior period adjustment will show you the dollar amount that you paid. Okay? And that's the detail. Just go back one screen here. Voice port basic adjustments. We saw units. I want to clarify this. The unit says 18.46. Okay? That unit is actually a dollar amount. Notice the unit rate says $1. When you go ahead and you drill down into it, you're getting prior period adjustment for this one phone number. Shows you the date that you're getting the adjustment for. Shows you the dollar amount. That's that 1846. I'm sorry?
Invoice date.
Invoice date. Thank you. The invoice date. So again, on the July invoice, you had a charge for this phone number for $18.46, and now you're getting that back on a following invoice. Okay? Is that easier to read? Okay, I got one person saying that. Just some additional tips for regarding disputes. Promise you that wasn't me. I don't know what that was.
Somebody's being tased.
Okay, somebody's being tased. Somebody on the phone. Okay. Retain all information relating to activities. Orders, RFSs, anything that you might need later on. We're not quite the IRS, but if you've got supporting documentation that you might want to use in the event that you have to submit a dispute, it's very helpful when you have that. You get an email from somebody that says, hey, look, yeah, I'll take care of it. If it's from GTA, if it's from the vendor, hold on to it. Okay? Because things get lost. Retain a copy of the confirmation of emails that provides your order, your due date, service request number, anything. Keep that information. And I can't stress this part enough. Submit your disputes on a timely basis. We've got the 90-day window that we talked about. If you want to get your inventory updated quickly, if you want to get your credits back quickly, you want to go ahead and review your invoice as quickly as possible. Submit your disputes in a timely basis. The last thing, I think it's the last thing, dispute updates to agencies. We've had some agencies say, hey, look, I don't know what's going on with this dispute. So what we started doing was we started actually creating a status update for each one of the Gets Full Service agencies. At the last business day of the month, we just go in and say, okay, what's the status of disputes that have come in or things that have closed in that particular month. Okay? Right now, it's been distributed to CRMs, but we're going to start including the customers on that. Okay? So both CRMs and customers will get this dispute updated list the last business day of the month. The spreadsheet itself includes a lot of detail, things like date of entry, the agency, the dispute description, service tower, DART ticket number. Just all the information that says, hey, look, you know, this is where my particular dispute is, and this is what status it's in. Okay? We don't want to keep you in the dark. We want you to know what's going on with your disputes. Down at the bottom is a quick snapshot of just a portion of the screen. You know, there's so many fields we couldn't fit it all on one slide, but this is a snapshot of what it might look like. Again, if you can't see it, it says agency, dispute description, service tower, DART ticket numbers, some of the things that I mentioned in terms of the fields that are included in that update. Okay, well, got 8 minutes. Let me just read the close, and then I'll take one of the questions that you have. So before you walk out the door, or if you're on the phone, okay, please complete your learning objectives evaluation. If you're participating by webinar and would like to complete the evaluation, please send an email to Sean Whitney. You might want to do that now if you don't already have an evaluation and you want to fill one out. If you want the webinar slides, webinar and audio slides will be available tomorrow. Right, tomorrow, or is it already available?
They're actually posted.
They're already posted. Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for your